Always trust.
We ask the question, what is needed in the world? Is that going to be?
Inger Andersen izvršna je direktorica Programa Ujedinjenih nacija za okoliš. Iza nje je više od 30 godina iskustva u međunarodnoj ekonomiji razvoja, održivosti životne sredine, strategije i operacija. Radila je na nizu pitanja, uključujući poljoprivredu, upravljanje životnom sredinom, očuvanje biodiverziteta, klimatske promjene, infrastrukturu, energiju, transport, upravljanje vodnim resursima i hidrodiplomatiju. Andersen obnaša i funkciju zamjenice generalnog sekretara Ujedinjenih nacija. Prilikom posjete Balkanu govorila je o gorućim ekološkim pitanjima za regiju i svet.
Ms. Andersen, thank you for your time for Al Jazeera.
Thank you so much for having me.
What is the main purpose of your visit to North Macedonia and to the region in general, since you came from Albania and you're leaving for Serbia?
Well, look, this is a region that is very important from an environmental point of view, and it's also a region that has gone through profound change during the last couple of decades. But it is a region that's stepping up and stepping in and leaning in on a number of environmental priorities, in spite of the other priorities that the countries have to navigate. And here specifically, I came because the Shah Mountain proclamation, which was made in 2021, which was during COVID and complexity, and I had promised the then minister that I would come here, and of course today I had the pleasure of meeting with the new minister. But earlier this morning, I arrived actually last night at Lake Ohrid, slept there, and I can tell you when I opened the windows, it literally took my breath away, how beautiful it was. I'd seen photos, but I'd never been here in person. And then I went to the Shah Mountains, and it was stunning, just stunning. So this is very, very exciting. So on the biodiversity story, there's a lot of positive things happening. Challenges too, we shouldn't lie or overlook the difficulties, but every country has the same problems in terms of biological diversity. But also the climate priority, which we are very much engaged with my organization, the United Nations Environment Program, and of course pollution. Pollution is a problem that we are also talking very much about during this trip.
Skopje, Sarajevo and Belgrade are known as some of the most polluted towns in the world. What do you see as the main challenge in the Balkans region, and in your opinions, is there a political will of the local governments to overcome these challenges?
So if you're talking pollution of those cities that you mentioned, of course you are referring to air pollution, I assume. And the air pollution, it's part, of course, the morphology of the landscape. There's kind of a lid on top of the city because there are mountains around it or other morphology, other landscaped kind of creations. But of course, why is it that this air is so polluted? It's largely a number of causes that we know. One is, of course, lignite coal and the kind of coal that we burn in our power plants. Another is that we use wood or other fuels for the winter. And there is a lot of smoke that comes when we burn wood or other fuels, oils, etc., in individual household for warming. And of course, old cars. We know that cars that are under the Euro 4 standard, less than Euro 4, they have a very high emissions load. That becomes a very toxic stew when you put it all together. So the kind of issues that each country will have to deal with differently is, of course, finding cleaner energy sources, having not individual heating units, but having district energy, dealing with, over time, renewing the vehicular fleet, and of course, thinking about emissions reduction and enforcement from dirty factories. These are the elements that we have to consider. But let me remind you of this. If you go back and look back in the beginning of the 1900s in London, there was something called the London fog. And everybody knew that it got yellow and disgusting air. And it was because of some of the same issues, not the cars, but the coal and the fires. And today we don't know London fog. So it's not something we have to live with, it's something we can fix.
So you were talking to the officials, to the representative of the NGOs. What about the political will to overcome these challenges?
I think that there is a lot of political will. I also think that there's complexity. You can't just turn off the coal like that. You can't just stop people from heating their homes like that. And these countries in the West Balkans, they have a number of different priorities that they need to attend to. They need to deal with the health sector. They need to deal with the education sector. They need to deal with the infrastructure sector. And yes, they absolutely need to deal with the environment sector and many other sectors too, don't get me wrong. And so there's only so much money that the government has, because it can only charge so much taxes of its people. And so having the will is a function of having the systems, the institutions, and the government, and of course the financing. What we are seeing is that there's a heavier engagement because people are demanding action on the air pollution side. Because kids get asthma, because people get sick. And obviously this is something that is not acceptable to a parent. And so we are seeing more pressure on political decision makers, which is correct. We're seeing the media asking questions, which is correct. And that is also how change will come. So I believe very much that there is a desire to make these shifts.
One of the main criticism especially for the Western Balkans countries, is the corruption. How corruption undermines the efforts for coping with the historical pollution and environmental hotspots.
I'm sad to say that corruption is unfortunately a global phenomenon. Nobody has monopoly on this terrible crime. But what I will say is this, how to overcome it is to call it out. Is to call it out when it is seen, is to hold people to account. And I'm happy to say that the countries that are navigating towards the EU, they are beginning to take this very seriously. And so we are seeing anti-corruption government entities being established within the ministries of justice, a separate watchdog. They belong to the government and they're there to keep an eye. At the same time, a free media is there to call it out. And unfortunately, in many countries, the West Balkans, as I say, do not have monopoly on this. We see that corruption, collusion between financial interest and politicians can lead to suboptimal outcome in the environmental sector. I do believe that there's a strong desire in all the countries to overcome this. Also because people are demanding it. People will not accept it. There was a time when maybe you didn't dare speak out, but I think people dare speak out. And I think the media is calling it out in more and more countries across the world. So it matters to do that, and it matters. And anyway, the young people will not stand for it.
How does UNEP support these countries, and what kind of assistance does the organization provide to this region?
Well, in this region, a lot of our work, and maybe since we're sitting in North Macedonia, I should start here and focus here. We've had at least 2 decades of engagement in this beautiful country. A lot of it has focused on the nature conservation, biological diversity, understanding the wealth that this nation has in terms of its absolutely stunning, stunning landscapes. Landscapes that are beautiful to look at, but also are a tourism attraction. And therefore, when they are a tourism attraction, it's very important to take care of them, because tourism generates jobs, generates opportunities, and keeps people in the land and on the land. And every country that I know of would like to keep its people on the land and in the land, rather than they leave. And so I think for a long time we've been involved in this field. And I'm very happy to see that the Shar Mountains now are connected between the countries and across borders. Borders are a human artificial line in the sand, but birds and bees and trees do not know borders. And so if we are able to create these continuous places of nature's beauty, it's not only good for nature, but it's very good for us too, because it will generate income and opportunities for people. But we've also been involved in climate change, especially supporting the governments on how do you create climate resilient infrastructure, how do you know what resilience would look like in extreme heat or extreme dryness, or with very large rainfall and flooding potential. What is it then that we need to do? So these are some of the areas. And then of course on pollution, where we still have a long way to go, and we talked about that, but we've also been working especially on chemical pollution, persistent organic pollutants.
How these efforts contribute to the process of EU integration of this region, especially when we know that the chapter 27 is one of the biggest and most expensive chapter in this process?
Well, certainly it will help a lot, because as countries tighten their environmental legislation at home, brings it into full compliance with the international treaties, the UN treaties that the country has signed, the Climate Change Convention, the Biological Diversity Convention, and all the chemicals and pollution conventions. As a country gets into compliance with these conventions, it is getting into compliance with EU acquis, with the expectations of the EU. So working with us is a little bit of a leg up towards climbing that ladder that EU accession process is. So we are seeing a lot of this folding right in to the chapter of relevance.
Ms. Andersen, what, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenge regarding in addressing the triple planetary crisis, and how UNEP and other stakeholders can overcome these challenges?
So on the climate side, because when you speak about the triple planetary crisis, we're speaking about the climate crisis, the nature and biodiversity loss crisis, and the pollution and waste crisis. So if we start with the climate crisis, I think here there are really two things that the countries of this region, as well as every other country, to be fair, have to tackle. One, think about the energy that we're using. Is it CO2 emitting? And yes, I know that these countries are really minuscule emitters compared to the big economies, but we're all having to shift. And so look at the energy emission profile. Is it coal? Is it oil? We know it is. What kind of vehicle fleet do we have? Can we make some more efficiencies in that fleet? That's on the emission side. But on the side of climate change, this region will be hard hit by the impact of climate change. The floods, the fires, the heat in the summer, and extreme rain in the winter. And this is why we need to begin to invest in resilience, investing in nature's ability to absorb the water. Let the water go where it needs to go. Don't build too close to the edge, because the water is stronger than we are. And be mindful of all of these impacts so that we can be very resilient. On biodiversity, I think the countries are very well underway, and our work really is about conserving what we have. Look, we have around 8 million species on this planet, and we are set to lose about 1 million if we continue as we were. But here now, we have the Shar Mountains now under protection. That's massive. And that gives an opportunity for the communities, but also for nature, to bounce back. Nature is very forgiving. It forgives us our trespasses much more than we know, and indeed nature will bounce back if we just leave it alone. And then on the pollution and waste crisis, here really it is about being very mindful of our factories, which we need for jobs and growth and all of that, but are we emitting a lot? Are we emitting into the water, into groundwater or into the rivers? And what filters do we need to put in place to avoid that, and including investing in solid waste management and garbage management, which this country is now stepping into in North Macedonia, but there's still a long way to go.
So globally, what will going to be like long terms and aspiration of UNEP for addressing the triple planetary crisis?
On climate change, we have agreed as a global community we are going to not get further, aim at 1.5, not more than 1.5 degrees by 2100. That's what we have to do. And so we have a lot of work to do, especially the largest economies, who are the 20 largest economies, the G20, are responsible for emitting nearly 80% of all carbon emissions. For biodiversity, we have agreed that by 2050 we want to live in harmony with nature. That means that we are not killing the species, but that we have a net gain, net positive gain on species. And of course, on pollution, it means that we have agreed that we will live in a pollution-free planet. These are the targets. This is what we have to do.
Can you tell us more about the problem of the plastic in the environment and why the negotiation over the plastic treaty are so important?
You know, was it just this January that we saw in the Bosnia River that there was 10,000 cubic meters of floating garbage coming down the river? It was all over the news. Unfortunately, that country is not alone. We are polluting our way to living in a plastic soup. When we look at our rivers, we look at our lakes, we have lots of our solid waste very close to the rivers and lakes, and it floats right into our rivers and right into our oceans. Every year, we produce 430 million tons of plastic, and 20 million tons of that go right into the ocean. So we have to ask ourselves, this precious material called oil that we take out of the belly of the earth, and we make something made of plastic, we use it for 5 minutes, then we throw it. What is that? That's madness. This is a very precious material. We should reuse it and reuse it and reuse it and reuse it. And of course, we should eliminate useless stuff. That plastic bags that we use for 5 minutes to carry 5 tomatoes home from the store, why? Then, depending on the kind of bag it is, 100 to 1,000 years in the landfill. I mean, that is seriously not smart. So we need to rethink. And the world came together in March of 2022 and decided that it wanted to negotiate a treaty, an agreement to stop and end plastic pollution. I just came from Paris from the second round of negotiations, and the intent is very much that we finish the negotiations by the end of 2024. And so we will have to eliminate plastic. We'll have to have the plastic that we do produce, keep it circular. We have to find alternative packaging materials, and we have to deal with solid waste. It's a very big ask, because in every country, including in North Macedonia, there's a significant plastics industry with jobs and so on. But that industry could produce the same plastic from recycled plastic. It doesn't have to be from virgin. And that industry could produce different packaging made out of recycled paper or cardboard. It doesn't have to be plastic. So it will not mean loss of jobs, but it will mean different type of economy. That's what we are negotiating.
You've met today young environmental professionals.
Yes.
You have a discussion with them. What are their perception about the state of environment?
They are so well informed. They know everything that's happening in their society and in the world. The beauty of today's youth is that they are connected and they are engaged and they are reading. And some of them are angry, and some of them, and therefore want to be activists, which I welcome, and some of them are already engaging. Some of the young people I met today, they are young entrepreneurs, they've started small companies towards a green transition. Others are students, very, very competent students at university. There were people who either had been or were the presidents of the Macedonia Students for Biology Society. They really know what's going on. And so what gives me hope often is that the young people of today are very informed, and they will step into the jobs, the kind of jobs I hope one day a young Macedonian or West Balkan person will replace me in my job, and they will then lead. When I was young, I was sort of one of few, but now I see many. And this is really wonderful and very, very encouraging.
So how your organization can help and concretely support them?
So within the project's portfolio that we are helping to implement here in this part of the world, of course there are many community organizations that are engaged, many young youth associations that are engaged. RICO, the West Balkan 6 youth organization, was the organizer of today's meeting. And so, of course, there are real opportunities there. But beyond that, just to let you know, UNEP is also very keen to get talent from this part of the world, because we don't think that we have enough talent from this part of the world. So part of what we're also doing is making clear to young people from this part of Europe, how do you even begin to apply for a job in the UN? And what is my chances, and what do I need to do? So that was also a conversation that we had.
In the situation of required energy transition, how do you comment on the debate about the small hydro plants? It's a big debate here in Balkans, in Macedonia, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example. Are they an ecological way for creating energy?
Look, well, it depends very much where. I think we have to say there are good dams and there are bad dams, and I'm in favor of the good dams. So a lot of it depends where, and a lot of it depends how, and who was consulted, and how was it built, right? If you want to put a dam in a very ecologically sensitive area where people don't want it, it's probably not a smart idea. But of course, we have to accept, you know, where does California get its power from? It's from hydro. Hydro is a fact of nature, a fact of the energy mix. And so we can't say we don't want windmills because they look ugly, we don't want solar panels because they cover the ground, we don't want coal because it causes climate change, we don't want hydro because it's a bad thing for the environment or for people. We have to look at what's least worst, what are the opportunities, and how can we do it with the most minimal of impacts. And I think it becomes part of the feasibility studies, looking at alternatives, and always hearing the voice of communities.
But they are destroying the small rivers, for example, here.
Yes. So
even in Shara Mountains, that it should be proclaimed national park.
So I spoke globally because this is my brief.
Yeah.
And I spoke globally because I cannot tell you that I'm opposed to hydro, because hydro is part of a broader global solution. But I would have to go and do the feasibility study on that small river and tell you what my opinion is. But in general, as I said, in ecological sensitive area, it is not a very optimal idea to place hydro there. At times, countries have very little choice because they have no other alternatives. But here there are alternatives. You know, I come from a country high up in the north, Denmark. We have no oil or gas to speak of. And for one thing, we are interconnected, so we can do energy trade with our neighbors. And for another, we have a very, very big wind industry, wind power. So really looking at the alternatives and what they look like and understanding that fully has to be part of the conversation.
We mentioned Ohrid Lake, National Park, Shara Mountain. What next can we expect from your organization regarding this region, Balkan region?
I think we will definitely very much stay in the biodiversity space. We've just approved, actually it will be launched in July of this year, the next phase for the Shar Mountains, which we're very excited about. But we will also continue to work on the climate side, especially on the resilience, so that communities can be resilient when climate impact hits. And of course, we need to work on pollution, air pollution, as well as solid waste and municipal waste management issues, including plastic.
Ms. Andersen, thank you for your time for Al Jazeera.
Thank you so much for having me.